They gave him a uniform, but no one gave him a gun. Noah stood in the long line of recruits with his hands folded behind his back, the sleeves of his jacket just a little too long, the helmet sitting awkwardly over his ears. He looked like the others' mud-splattered boots, gray wool, wide eyes. But in one very particular way, he was different. He had asked not to carry a rifle. It wasn't a protest. It wasn't defiance. It was something quieter than that. When the recruiter had placed a weapon into his hands, Noah had simply stepped back and said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "I'd rather carry something that heals." The recruiter laughed at first, then scowled, then shrugged. "No use for softness here," he muttered, and moved down the line. But someone else, an older man with a faded medic's cross sewn onto his shoulder, took notice. He tapped Noah on the arm and asked, "You know how to bandage a wound?" Noah nodded. "Then follow me." That was how he ended up in the back, away from the front line, among crates of morphine, clean cloths, and letters from home. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't even trained. But he listened. He watched. He cleaned, fetched, soothed, and remembered. He learned where the extra gauze was kept. He memorized the names of the ones who didn't make it, so he could write them into small folded notes and slip them into their pockets. Noah didn't carry a gun, but he carried 100 small things, water flasks, needles, rags, words that didn't always make it out in time. He wrote letters for the dying. He closed the eyes of boys barely older than him. He did not cry, but he did not harden. The others didn't know what to make of him. Some ignored him completely. Others laughed behind his back. They called him Feather Boy, Nursemaid, the Ghost, and other names more cruel. One in particular, a tall, wiry soldier named Victor, seemed to take personal offense to Noah's presence. "You think you're better than us," Victor sneered one night, standing over Noah as he rinsed out a bloodied cloth. "You think you're too holy to hold a weapon." Noah didn't answer, not because he had nothing to say, but because there was a wounded man next to him who had just asked for water. He handed over the canteen, checked the bandage again, and moved on. Victor scoffed and turned away. Coward. Noah flinched, but didn't stop. The nights were the hardest, not because of the cold, or the shelling, or the hunger, but because that's when the boys started talking in their sleep. Noah would sit near the back of the tent, listening to them whisper names, sometimes mothers, sometimes girls back home, sometimes dogs or brothers or songs. He would hear the rattle of breath, the dreams of fear, the way their hands clenched into fists against imagined enemies. He never judged them. He just waited until they calmed. Sometimes he hummed softly. A lullaby from childhood, or maybe just a string of notes. Something steady, something human. One morning, a boy named Kasim staggered in with a leg wound that bled too fast. There were no doctors nearby, just Noah, with shaking hands and a quiet prayer he didn't know he believed in. He tied the tourniquet. He cleaned the wound. He spoke to Kasim the whole time, told him about his grandfather's fishing boat, about the first time he learned how to swim, about a dream where the sea had turned into music. Kasim survived, and from that day forward, some of the others started looking at Noah differently, not with respect, perhaps, but with something approaching recognition. Still, the war pressed on. They marched through forests, across fields riddled with landmines, into villages that had once smelled of bread and laughter, but now only reeked of fire. Noah saw too much, but he refused to look away. One afternoon, as they crossed a shattered bridge, gunfire erupted from the ridge. Men dropped. Chaos followed. Noah ducked behind a broken cart, clutching a medical bag instead of a weapon. He crawled forward toward the noise, not away from it because he'd seen Victor fall. Not far, just ahead, face down in the mud, his leg twisted unnaturally, his rifle flung beside him. For a moment, Noah hesitated. Victor had mocked him, humiliated him, but now he was just a boy in pain, crying out for someone, anyone to help. Noah ran. Bullets tore the air around him, but he didn't stop. He reached Victor, rolled him over, checked the pulse. "Don't touch me." Victor gasped, eyes wide. "You're bleeding," Noah whispered. "And I don't leave people behind." And then he smiled, a soft, steady thing. "Even ones who call me names." He wrapped the leg, hoisted Victor onto his back, and crawled inch by inch back toward cover. It felt like hours, but eventually, they made it. Noah collapsed beside Victor, lungs burning, hands shaking, and Victor, too stunned to speak, just stared at him. Then, finally, he said, voice raw, "You don't even have a weapon." Noah reached into his coat and pulled out a bandage, held it up like a flag. "This is what I fight with." That night, no one mocked him. No one laughed. They simply watched as Noah moved from cot to cot, checking pulses, changing dressings, offering sips of water. He wasn't a soldier, but in that moment, quiet, steady, real, he was the bravest among them. Victor had always been the loudest voice in the barracks. He laughed the hardest, swore the most, and told the bloodiest stories of the front. He had a scar on his chin from a bar fight and a tattoo of a dragon curling up his forearm. Men followed him not because he was kind, but because he was unafraid, or at least, that's how it seemed. So when Victor was shot, everything changed. He didn't scream, not at first. It was as if his body hadn't yet caught up to the pain. But the moment he hit the ground, his leg twisted. The bone jutting like broken glass under the skin, he let out a roar so raw it silenced the whole unit. And no one moved. Not because they didn't care, because they couldn't. The snipers had found them. The air snapped with bullets. One wrong step could end everything. But someone did move. Noah, the boy without a gun. He didn't duck behind the sandbags. He didn't wait for an order. He just crawled low, fast, determined to cross open ground, past the shattered remains of a wheelbarrow and over a fallen fence. By the time he reached Victor, the man was half-conscious and furious. "Go back," Victor gasped, his voice thick with pain. "Are you stupid?" "You're bleeding," Noah said, breathless but calm. "I'm here to help." "I don't need." Victor tried to sit up, then choked on his own breath. "You need everything right now," Noah interrupted gently. "But mostly, you need someone who won't leave." It wasn't easy. The wound was deep. The bleeding wasn't stopping. And there was no cover. But Noah had been here before. He pressed gauze into the wound, wrapped the leg as best he could, whispered reassurances, though he didn't know if Victor could hear them. Then, with all the strength his thin frame could muster, he dragged the man inch by inch toward the ridge. Bullets snapped in the dirt around them. Twice. Noah fell. Once. He almost lost hold of Victor completely. But he didn't stop. And when they reached the line, the others rushed forward finally to lift Victor and carry him the rest of the way. Noah collapsed beside him, chest heaving, palms raw, eyes closed. No one said a word for several minutes. Not even Victor. Later, when the medic stitched the leg and gave Victor morphine, the camp grew quiet again. The fires were low, the rations half-eaten, and the sky above shimmered with pale, cold stars. Noah sat by the fire, bandaging his scraped hands. Across from him, a few men watched silently. There was no more mockery in their eyes, only something softer, uneasy, curious. Victor, on a stretcher not far away, finally spoke. "Why did you come for me?" His voice was thin, barely audible over the wind. Noah looked up, because no one else did. "That's not an answer," Victor said. Noah took a breath. "Because I believe none of us should die alone. Not even the ones who call me names." A silence stretched between them, long and strange. Then Victor laughed, not loud, not mocking. A real laugh, small, disbelieving. "You're the strangest damn person I've ever met." Noah smiled. "You're not the first to say that." In the days that followed, Victor didn't speak much. He couldn't walk yet, and the pain came in waves. But he watched Noah move through the camp with quiet purpose, refilling canteens, adjusting splints, listening to the half-conscious ramblings of soldiers drifting in and out of morphine haze. He saw how the boy never raised his voice, never snapped, never flinched. Even when faced with the worst of it, the missing limbs, the sobbing, the desperate gasps, he stayed. And that, more than anything, confused Victor. One night, as the wind howled through the cracks in the canvas tents, Victor called Noah over. "You ever held a gun?" he asked. Noah shook his head. Not once. Why Noah didn't answer right away. He sat down beside Victor, letting the silence settle before speaking. "When I was 6, he said quietly, "my village was shelled. I remember hiding under a kitchen table while my brother bled out beside me. There were soldiers nearby, some of ours, some not. All of them had rifles, but no one stopped to help." Victor swallowed hard. "My mother died that day," Noah continued. "My brother too. But one woman, an old midwife, she crawled into the house hours later. She bandaged my leg, even though I wasn't wounded. She stayed until dawn." Noah turned to look at him. "She didn't have a weapon either, just her hands." The fire crackled. "You think that makes you better than the rest of us?" Victor asked, though there was no malice in it this time. Noah shook his head. "Not better. Just different." Victor didn't respond. But the next morning, when Noah handed him water, Victor didn't look away. And when another soldier called Noah a name under his breath, Victor, still too weak to stand, told him to shut up. No one laughed after that. In time, Victor healed. Slowly, painfully. He'd never walk quite the same again. But the change in him went deeper than the limp. He no longer barked orders. He asked questions. He no longer laughed at the wounded. He listened to them. And he began to sit with Noah, late at night, talking not of victories, but of regrets. One night, as they stared at the moon through the torn fabric of the tent, Victor said, "You know, I used to think courage was about who could pull the trigger faster." Noah raised an eyebrow. Victor shook his head. "But it's you. You're the brave one. You went into hell for someone who treated you like dirt." Noah didn't answer. He just reached for the battered canteen between them and passed it over. And for the first time since the war began, they drank together, not as soldier and medic, but as two boys trying to survive something far bigger than both of them. By the time Victor could walk again, the leaves had begun to fall. It wasn't obvious at first, just a drift of yellow scattered across the muddy path, a slight coolness in the morning wind. But Noah noticed. He always noticed small things like the way the frost lingered longer on tents, or how the birds didn't sing as much anymore. The war was still raging, of course, but the world had a strange way of continuing in spite of it. That morning, Victor took his first steps on crutches. Every movement was stiff, his jaw clenched tight against the pain. But he didn't complain, not once. Noah watched from a distance, ready to step in if needed, but he never had to. Later that day, Victor sat next to Noah outside the medical tent. Neither spoke at first. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was something else, like the hush between verses of a song. "You remember the first thing you said to me?" Victor finally asked. Noah tilted his head. "You mean when I told you I wouldn't leave you to die?" Victor snorted. "No. Before that. Back when you were cleaning blood-stained cloths and pretending you didn't hear me calling you a coward." Noah smiled faintly. "I wasn't pretending." "Why didn't you ever say anything back?" Noah looked down at his hands. "Because you weren't really talking to me. You were talking to your fear. I just happened to be in the way." Victor sat back, staring at the sky. "You know, that might be the wisest thing anyone's ever said to me." It was the beginning of something unexpected. They started working side by side. Noah taught Victor how to change a dressing without reopening a wound, how to boil water to sterilize tools, how to keep someone alive when the pain got too loud to bear. Victor, in turn, told stories not just of battles, but of life before. He talked about his sister, who used to sing opera while making stew, about his father, who always whistled while fixing fences, about the dog that followed him home from school and never left. Noah listened, not because the stories were extraordinary, but because they were real, human. They reminded him that even soldiers had soft places inside them, especially soldiers. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, a soldier named Elias stumbled into camp, holding his stomach. He had been hit by shrapnel deep, jagged, and ugly. No one else was around. Victor froze for half a second, then moved. He shouted for Noah, grabbed the stretcher, and helped lower Elias onto a cot. Together, they cleaned the wound, Noah instructed calmly. Victor followed every word. Their hands moved in sync, one holding the compress, the other stitching with trembling fingers. Elias survived. Later, as they washed the blood off their arms, Victor looked at Noah and said, "I get it now." Noah looked over. "I get why you chose this path." That night, around the fire, something remarkable happened. Victor, once the loudest, toughest voice in camp, told everyone what Noah had done. He told them how Noah had saved him, how he'd refused to give up even when everyone else had. The soldiers listened, really listened. When Victor finished, there was a long silence. Then someone passed Noah a mug of tea. Another patted his shoulder. It wasn't a parade. It wasn't a medal. But it was something far more sacred. Respect. The next morning, Victor found Noah sketching in a small, worn notebook. "You draw?" he asked, leaning over. "A little." Noah replied, "Mostly things I don't want to forget." Victor flipped the pages slowly. There were rough outlines of trees, boots, bandages, and faces, gentle faces, wounded faces. One looked suspiciously like Victor. "That me." Victor grinned. Noah nodded. "That was the moment you stopped being angry." "I didn't stop being angry," Victor said. "I just stopped aiming it at the wrong people." A few nights later, during a lull in the shelling, a group of young recruits arrived at camp. Fresh faces, shaky hands. One of them couldn't have been more than 16. They stared wide-eyed at everything: the tense, the wounded, the hardened expressions of those who'd been here too long. And then they saw Noah, still gentle, still quiet, still carrying no weapon. One of the new boys whispered, "Who's that?" A nearby soldier answered, "That's Noah. He doesn't fight, but he's saved more lives than anyone here." The boy blinked. "Why doesn't he carry a rifle, Victor?" Overhearing. Stepped forward. "Because sometimes," he said, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, "the bravest thing you can do is choose not to harm." That night, Victor couldn't sleep. He sat outside the tent, staring at the stars, clutching a cigarette he didn't light. Noah joined him after a while. "Thinking about home?" Noah asked softly. "Trying to remember what it feels like." Victor replied, "Not just the place, the idea of it." Noah nodded. "I think that's what we're really fighting for," he said. "Not borders, not victories. Just the chance to feel like we belong somewhere again." Victor looked over. "Do you think we ever will?" Noah was quiet for a long time, then said, "If we carry peace in our hands, the same way others carry rifles, maybe." The wind picked up. A leaf danced across the ground, landing between them. Neither man moved. The world was still burning beyond the hills. But for a moment, in that space between healing and hope, between bullets and silence, two soldiers sat side by side, one with no rifle, and the other no longer needing one to feel brave. And they watched the stars, as if, somehow, that would be enough. The orders came at dawn, sharp and final. The company was to move east, toward a recently contested village. Intelligence said the enemy had fallen back, but no one believed it. Villages rarely stayed quiet for long. Noah packed his things in silence. The men around him moved quickly, loading rifles, securing boots, muttering about terrain and artillery support. Victor limped as he helped fold a stretcher, still walking slower than the others, but with more steadiness than pain now. He looked over at Noah and gave a nod, just one, but that was enough. It meant, "I'm ready." They moved in formation, boots pressing into cold soil, the wind carrying faint sounds from somewhere beyond the tree line, crackling wood, metal shifting, an occasional far-off rumble. The air tasted like rust and old smoke. Noah walked near the middle of the line, his bag full of bandages, morphine, and cloth soaked with the scent of antiseptic. By late afternoon, the village came into view, buildings with missing roofs, walls cratered by shelling, a well half-collapsed, a cart turned on its side and abandoned. But there was no sign of life, not from friend or foe. It felt wrong. The quiet was too complete, as if sound itself had been driven out of the place. The soldiers fanned out to search. Noah stayed with Victor, near what used to be a small bakery, now a blackened husk. A broken sign still dangled above the door, swinging in the wind. Ash crunched under their boots as they stepped inside. It was Victor who heard it first, a faint, rhythmic thudding, like someone striking wood with soft fists. They froze. Then it came again, muffled, erratic. Noah followed the sound, stepping carefully over shattered tiles and broken beams. Behind the counter, there was a large cabinet, its door hanging off the hinge. He knelt. The sound was louder now. It wasn't fists. It was breathing, quick, panicked. He reached forward, lifted a scorched blanket, and saw two small eyes staring back. A child, maybe 7 years old, filthy, shaking, eyes wide with terror. Noah didn't speak. He didn't make a sound. Slowly, he held out his hand and waited. The child didn't move. "I'm not here to hurt you," he whispered. "You're safe now. You're not alone." Minutes passed. Then, inch by inch, the child crawled out. A boy, thin as a shadow, with blood on his sleeve and dust in his hair. He looked past Noah at Victor, then at the sun through a shattered window, then down at his feet as if unsure how they still worked. Victor crouched beside them, his face unreadable. "Is he hurt?" he asked. Noah checked quickly. A shallow cut on the boy's arm, bruises on his knees, but nothing fatal. The blood belonged to someone else. "What's your name?" Noah asked gently. The boy said nothing. "Where are your parents?" Still nothing. Victor looked around the wreckage. "They're not here anymore," he said quietly. Noah wrapped a blanket around the boy's shoulders. "He needs food, and water, and warmth, and people who won't aim guns at him," Victor added. Noah glanced up. That sentence coming from Victor would have been unthinkable weeks ago. But now it felt natural, right? They had both changed. Outside, some of the other soldiers were calling out, saying the buildings were clear, that there was no enemy presence. Noah emerged from the ruins with the child in his arms. The others stared. Some softened. Others looked away. A few were clearly unsure what to feel. They didn't ask questions. War had taught them not to. They made camp near the village edge, just beneath a cluster of bare trees. The child stayed close to Noah, never letting go of his sleeve. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. But when Victor handed him a piece of stale bread, he ate without hesitation. And when Noah tucked him into a nest of blankets that night, the boy finally exhaled. Victor sat beside the fire, tossing bits of kindling into the flames. "He won't make it," he said. Noah looked up. "I don't mean he'll die," Victor clarified. "I mean, inside. Kids like him, when they see what he's seen, they stop being kids." Noah stared into the fire. "Then we don't give up on him. We teach him that not everyone is cruel, that someone will still reach out, that he can heal, even if it takes a long time." Victor sighed. "You always believe that?" Noah nodded. "I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of surviving?" The wind picked up. Leaves rattled like bones. Later that night, Noah woke to a soft rustling sound. He sat up, expecting to see one of the soldiers, or maybe a fox sniffing around the food sacks. But instead, it was the boy curled at the edge of the blankets, reaching toward Noah's notebook. Noah moved slowly, sat beside him. The boy looked up, startled, but Noah smiled. "You want to draw?" he asked. The boy hesitated, then nodded. Noah handed him the pencil. The child stared at the blank page for a long time. Then, with small, deliberate strokes, he drew a house simple, with a door and 4 windows. Then a figure, and another, holding hands, a sun, a bird, a single flower. Noah didn't speak. He just watched as a silent world was rebuilt on paper. The boy didn't look up again that night. He kept drawing until sleep finally took him. Victor awoke at dawn to find Noah and the child curled together beside the smoldering fire, the notebook resting on the boy's chest. He said nothing. He just stood there for a long moment, arms folded, eyes soft, as the first light of morning crept across the camp. Then he turned and added another log to the fire, because some things like warmth, like kindness, had to be kept alive, especially in a world trying so hard to freeze them out. The sky was low and gray the morning the child began to speak. It was not loud or dramatic, just a single word, whispered while Noah was tying his boots. "Amin," the boy said. Noah paused, then turned slowly. "Your name." The boy nodded once, eyes still fixed on the patch of earth in front of him. Victor overheard from a distance, his hand stopping mid-motion as he poured water into a kettle. Amin. A name finally given shape. It made something shift between them all, something simple but sacred. They didn't ask for more. Not where he was from, not what had happened. That information would come, if and when the boy chose. In war, trust was never demanded. It was earned over time, in silences shared and warmth offered without question. That afternoon, the orders came again. They were moving north, toward another checkpoint near the river crossing. Noah carried the heavier packs now, letting Victor move at his own pace with the crutches. Amin walked between them, quiet but alert. He didn't hold Noah's hand anymore, but he never drifted far. The path took them through fields browned by cold and neglect. Burnt fences and empty carts lay in their way, like relics from a forgotten time. Occasionally, Noah would glance back to check on Victor's limp or to offer Amin water. No one said much. The road ahead stretched with uncertainty, but none of them hesitated. At the next camp, they pitched their tents near a ridge. There was a half-standing structure nearby, the remains of what might have been a school, blackboards with broken corners, a rusted bell. Amin climbed the rubble quietly and stood where a teacher might have once stood, staring into the wind. He didn't smile, but he didn't cry either. That night, Noah reached into his satchel and took out a folded piece of paper. It was yellowed, worn at the edges, and had been refolded too many times to count. Victor saw him holding it and asked, "You going to finally write it?" Noah hesitated, then nodded. He took out a small pencil and sat by the fire, the letter on his lap. Amin curled beside him, watching the flames flicker. And slowly, Noah began to write. "Dear Eli, if you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to finish. It's been years since the last time I saw your face, since you lifted me into the trees to pick apricots, since we walked barefoot along the stream behind the bakery. War changes people. It changed me, but not in the way people think. I didn't become hardened. I became quieter. I didn't want to fight with a gun, so I chose to fight with care. I've spent these last months holding the hands of dying men, whispering them into peace. I've cleaned wounds, delivered babies, bandaged children. I've walked through fire, not to destroy, but to save. Today I met a boy. His name is Amin. He reminds me of you. He's small, scared, but full of something I can't describe yet. Not hope, something quieter. A seed that might grow, if we water it enough. Victor is here too. You'd never believe what he's become. The loud soldier who once laughed at me now sits with me at night. telling me stories about his family, about dreams. He doesn't carry bitterness anymore. Not all of it, anyway. Maybe war breaks more than bones. Maybe it breaks the lies we told ourselves before we came here. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know if I'll make it home, but if I do, I'll bring Amin with me. He deserves to see a world where laughter isn't a luxury. I hope you're safe. I hope you still hum that song you used to sing when you cooked rice with cumin and lemon. I hear it sometimes, in the wind. I miss you. With love, always Noah. When he finished writing, the fire was low. Amin was asleep beside him, fingers curled into the blanket like roots clinging to soil. Victor hadn't spoken for a long time, but now he leaned closer. "Who's Eli?" Noah folded the letter carefully. "Someone I once loved. Someone I couldn't protect." Victor nodded slowly. "Do you think they'd be proud of you?" Noah didn't answer right away. Then, "I hope so." In the days that followed, the weather worsened. Rain fell steadily, making mud of the roads and soaking boots through to the skin. But there was no option to stop. They moved as ordered, setting up tents in shallow woods and cooking over barely burning fires. Amin caught a fever on the third day, not high but enough to worry them. Noah tended to him constantly, feeding him warm broth, wiping sweat from his brow, whispering stories about birds that never stopped flying. Victor watched silently, sometimes handing over herbs or holding Amin's hand when Noah's were full. One night, while Amin slept fitfully, Victor said, "You never lose hope, do you?" Noah looked up, eyes heavy. "No," he said. "Not while there's breath left." Victor was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small metal tin. Inside was a folded piece of paper, a photograph, creased and faded. "This is my sister," he said. "Anna. She died 2 winters ago. Pneumonia." He handed it to Noah. The woman in the photo had bright eyes and hair pulled back in a loose braid. She looked like she could have made people laugh just by being in the room. "She was the one who taught me to dance," Victor said. "In the kitchen, we'd spill soup all over the place, but we didn't care." Noah smiled softly. "She would have liked you," Victor added. "You're stubborn, but you listen." Amin stirred and let out a small whimper. Noah leaned down, whispering gently, and the boy settled again. Victor looked at him for a long time, then said, "When this war ends, I'm going to find a way to help rebuild." "You already are," Noah said. Later that night, while everyone else slept, Noah stood at the ridgeline, holding his letter in both hands. He looked up at the clouds, at the stars barely piercing through. Then he tore the letter into small pieces, letting the wind carry them away, scattering them like prayers, because some words didn't need to arrive to be heard. He returned to the tent quietly, crawled in beside Amin, and closed his eyes. Not in despair, but in peace. The war wasn't over, but something was healing, and for now, that was enough. By the time spring came, the fields had begun to bloom again. Tiny bursts of green poked through the scorched earth, and birdsong, hesitant at first, returned to the early mornings. The war hadn't ended, not officially, but something in the air had changed. The thunder of artillery was now an occasional echo rather than a constant roar. Troops moved slower, not because they were tired, but because the urgency had given way to waiting. Peace talks were rumored. Whispers traveled faster than bullets. Noah sat by the edge of a shallow creek, washing out a strip of gauze. Amin crouched nearby, building a small dam from pebbles and twigs, focused as if it were a cathedral. Victor was sleeping back at the camp, finally resting after a rough night filled with coughing and muttering in his sleep. The wound on his leg had long healed, but memories left deeper scars than metal ever could. Amin looked up suddenly. "Will the fighting stop?" The question landed like a stone in Noah's chest. He didn't answer immediately. "I think so," he said. After a moment, Not all at once, but slowly, like how snow melts. Amin seemed to consider that. But even when snow melts, the ground stays cold for a long time. Noah nodded. Yes, that's true. Later that day, a truck arrived at camp. A white flag was tied to its antenna, flapping loosely. 2 officers stepped out, both with weary eyes and creased uniforms. They gathered the soldiers and read from a thin stack of papers an agreement had been reached. Temporary ceasefire, an exchange of wounded, a chance, perhaps, for the war to truly end. Cheers were not shouted, no hats were thrown. Instead, there was a long, collective exhale, as if every lung had been holding its breath for years. Noah packed his things slowly. He wasn't sure where to go. Home was a word he had avoided thinking about. The city he'd left behind was likely changed beyond recognition. His apartment, if still standing, would be filled with dust and silence. Yet part of him longed for a familiar window, a kettle, a place where he wasn't always bracing for sirens. Victor limped toward him as he closed his bag. "You heading back, I think so," Noah said. "And the boy. He comes with me." Victor smiled. "I figured." They stood in silence for a while, looking at the soldiers around them, some embracing, others staring into the horizon, unsure what came next. Then Victor pulled something from his coat. It was a small wooden carving, a bird with wings spread wide. "Anna made this," he said. "She called it the Hope Sparrow. Told me to keep it until the day I saw something worth living for." He pressed it into Noah's hand. "I think today qualifies." Noah held the sparrow gently. "What about you? There's a village north of here, barely standing, but the people want to rebuild. I'll help them. Maybe teach the kids how to fish, or at least how not to shoot each other." They shared a long look, the kind that doesn't need words. When the transport trucks arrived, soldiers began climbing aboard. Noah and Amin sat together near the back. The boy clutched his sketchbook tightly, his latest drawing tucked inside a picture of Victor and Noah standing on either side of a campfire, with a small figure between them holding a lantern. The label under the lantern read, "Light." The road back was quiet, winding. They passed through towns still bearing the wounds of conflict, walls riddled with holes, trees split by shells. But here and there, signs of life emerged. A woman hanging clothes on a line, children chasing a wheel, a man playing violin on a porch, as if daring the world to interrupt him again. At the city checkpoint, officials reviewed documents. Noah handed over the papers, signed by command. The officer glanced at Amin. "Your son." "Yes," Noah said, without pause. The officer scribbled something, stamped the page, and waved them through. No one asked anything else. The apartment was still there. Dusty, yes. Cobwebbed, but standing. Amin explored every corner with wide eyes, finding spoons, cushions, a cracked radio, a stack of books that had survived under the bed. Noah watched him from the kitchen, boiling water for tea. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the city lit up in fractured glows, they sat on the balcony together. Amin pointed at a star. "That one looks like the sparrow." "Maybe it is," Noah replied. "Maybe someone just set it free." Weeks passed. Amin began attending a local school. He struggled at first, his words quiet, his gaze cautious, but the teacher was kind and patient. Each afternoon, he would come home and draw, not bombs or tanks, but faces, smiles, a bakery, a bird, a house with a red door. One morning, Noah opened a letter delivered by post. It was written in rough but familiar handwriting. "North is colder than I remember," Victor had written, "but the people are warm. I'm teaching the kids how to build bridges, literal ones, not just metaphorical. Turns out I'm good at it. Maybe one day Amin can visit, bring his drawings. There's a wall here that needs color." Noah smiled, folded the letter, and placed it beside the sparrow on the shelf. That night, Amin asked him, "Will there ever be another war?" Noah was quiet. Then he said, "Maybe, but not in this house." Amin nodded and whispered, "Good." As they turned off the lights, a faint breeze moved through the open window, lifting the corner of a page in Amin's sketchbook. It was the drawing of the campfire again, but this time, the figure in the center held not just a lantern, but a seed, and around it, from the earth, tiny green shoots reached up toward the stars. Some stories end with triumph, others with tragedy, but some, like this one, end with something far more powerful, a quiet promise. That even in a world scorched by war, a boy with no rifle can carry enough light to guide two nations out of darkness.